Thanks for joining. My name is Giuseppe. I'll be your host today. I'm part of the IoTeX team. I work in the developer relations team. I've been with IoTeX for almost a year now. I've been in Web3 for a few years. I follow the space. I'm really passionate about it, and I'm really looking forward to all the things that I see happening in the space and how the space is going to progress over the next few years. And obviously, account abstraction being a super hot topic right now, being really a game changer for users, for developers, for experience in general in Web3. So let's get rolling. I wanted to introduce my co-host. No, I'm amazing. Let's see. Okay, great. Roland, you're more than welcome to do so.
So just be quick. So this is Roland. I'm the CEO, co-founder of IoTeX. My background is cryptography, getting into Bitcoin, Ethereum pretty early. So that's about me.
Awesome. Yeah, let's go around the panelists, and then Noam will go with your introduction, and then we'll get it started. So let's just go with Chiara from Third Web.
Hi, everyone. So I'm Chiara. I'm a developer experience engineer at Third Web. I'll just give a brief overview of what Third Web is, those people who don't know. So we're a complete Web3 developer framework to help you easily build Web3 apps. So we offer lots of different SDKs, including a Solidity SDK and pre-built contracts to help you easily build smart contracts. And then SDKs which can understand your smart contract and therefore provide the ability to easily build those smart contracts into your apps and then have extra functionality based on the extensions or industry standards that you have in those smart contracts, and then therefore unlock that functionality.
Awesome, thank you. Thanks for sharing. And I think 1 year in web is a pretty good amount, definitely substantial. Let's move on. Maybe Danny, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure, yeah. Hey everyone, this is Danny. I'm pleased to be joining you. I'm coming from Polygon Labs, where I do technical documentation and technical education. I've been in the space for just over 2 years. I've been at Polygon Labs for around a year, and excited to be joining you today.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for joining. Battery, let's go with you.
Hey everyone, my name is Bader, or Battery as sometimes called around here. I'm a technical educator at the Web3 Foundation, so I mostly work on Polkadot, documenting Polkadot, and educating all around Polkadot, as well as Substrate, which is the framework for building blockchains. So yeah, very nice to be here.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us. Great. James.
Hey everyone, I'm James Bork, co-founder and co-CEO of Intu.xyz. We do Web3 accounts with secure multi-party computation. So we're coming at this from a little bit more of the cryptographic side. We've been aiming to achieve similar things to account abstraction since we've started, and are very excited to be part of this conversation because we are firmly of the opinion that together kind of multi-party computation and cryptography with account abstraction is really the clear path to that user experience, that human first experience that I think we're all looking for, right, for the next billion. So happy to be here. Originally from San Francisco, but based in Paris now. So kind of bopping all over the place. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, our pleasure. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to hear what you have to say about this. So we'll get into this in just a couple of minutes. Let's finish the round of introduction. Pseudo Theos, if I pronounce it correctly.
Yes.
Floor is yours.
Hi, I'm Pseudo. I'm a researcher at Scroll. I've been in crypto since about 2013, moving to Ethereum in late 2016, early 2017. Scroll is bytecode compatible ZK EVM, and we're super passionate about account abstraction, especially ERC-4337. As we see, it's a really nice sort of drop-in user experience upgrade.
Amazing. Thanks for joining. And yeah, we'll delve into it a little bit more in depth in a sec. Tom.
Hey everyone, my name is Tom. So originally I got into crypto at around 2013. I founded Portis back in 2018. For those unfamiliar, Portis is an SDK for Web3 developers, pretty much the first web-based SDK. And Portis was acquired by Shapeshift in 2020, and I've recently joined the Ethereum Foundation to work on ERC-4337, which I see as, I wouldn't even say a direct continuation of Portis. It's a continuation of what I wanted to accomplish, which means bringing blockchain to the average person. But it's just there's no comparison. What this standard can do and what it encompasses simply blew me away when I read it. So I was super excited to join the team to work on it.
Amazing. Thank you. We're really looking forward to see what you have to say. Okay, we have Larry and then Noam, my co-host for today.
Hey guys, this is Larry. I'm head of business development at IoTex. Tomorrow is actually my 5-year anniversary in crypto. So it's just amazing to see how this space has evolved over the past 5 years to the point where we're talking about concepts like account abstraction that's going to bring, as the other panelists said, crypto to the masses to solve a lot of the user experience issues and also create a lot of new business models, especially in the DePIN and the Internet of Things space, as we do here at IoTex. So excited to share more throughout the call.
Awesome. Thank you, Larry. Thanks for joining us. And now, last but not least, Noam from Alchemy, my co-host for today. Yeah, feel free to introduce yourself. So let's go ahead and move on with the agenda. I would like to now dig a little bit deeper into what account abstraction is and specifically what your project is working on in this specific topic. Roland, you maybe want to start and let us know what IoTex has been working on in terms of account abstraction and how they're tackling this topic.
Yeah, starting with IoTex, basically we actually started the project back in 2017, really around about the IoT and blockchain, but like our real vision is try to connect in the real world to the Web3 space, to the crypto space. So we start our own layer 1 chain actually in 2017, 2018, which has been running by 100 more delegates, processing 50 million transactions, like a 200-ish DeFi NFT projects running on top of this one. And starting from last year, we're starting like a new protocol that also works with IoTex layer 1 and other layer 1s as well. That basically funnels in all the real world data in a real time manner, doing compute, validation, and everything on top of. So that way, so we can actually introduce the real world assets, real world activity, and tokenize them. And so like there is a very interesting real world aspects we're working on. It's called deepin, decentralized physical infra networks. So definitely like we're also looking into like an AA as well. So there is like an IoTex improvement proposal that has been like floating around last month about implementing AA on top of like IoTex chain, so we can making those like a deepin users, real world users, even easier in terms of like the access like their blockchain accounts. So that's roughly like what we're working on.
Yeah, that's great. And yeah, we'll get more into that. Thank you for sharing that. Let's move on. I want to first start gathering like everybody's perspective on this, and I'd like to then delve into a little bit more of a conversation between all of us. Okay. Let's maybe talk a little bit about Web3 Foundation. What are you guys working on? You guys are definitely nurturing, applications, helping a lot of developers out there. So what does that have to do with account abstractions, and how are you tackling it?
Yeah, so I'm from Web3 Foundation, and the flagship project, which you've probably heard about, is Polkadot, which is a multi-chain kind of layer 0 blockchain, which is essentially a blockchain for other blockchains. And the idea is that kind of you can have one relay chain with a bunch of other parachains, as they're called, which are kind of side chains that connect to the relay chain. And together they form this like very secure network that's kind of takes part in the shared security model. As far as account abstraction goes, it's actually quite interesting because for a while, Polkadot and the underlying technology, which is called Substrate, which is the framework used to build Polkadot, had a lot of modules that kind of cater to many of the concepts that account abstraction kind of brings. And namely, that has to do with the fact that account abstraction kind of as a whole, its whole idea, and I'd say it has maybe two main goals, one of which is user experience, obviously, the fact that people don't have to deal as much with these like hindersome private keys, which are very hard to manage for many people, including technically inclined people. These are quite difficult to manage. Another thing that I'd say a huge part of it is actually security and safety. It's the fact that you can change the type of signature that can be used when you're signing some transaction or some action on behalf of your accounts is very huge, because it's about future-proofing this technology. If for some reason some well-known encryption standard becomes defunct or something, some exploit occurs, quantum computing happens, and now we're not able to sign transactions as we're normally able to, or send things as we're normally able to, using this sort of abstraction, it adds this layer of making things generic enough so where we can change underlying, signature algorithms, encryption algorithms, stuff like that. so that we avoid these like very huge pitfalls without having to go very deep into the consensus and actual network layers.
Great. And actually, which brings me to maybe a point that we should try to make before we move on, which is, let's maybe describe a little bit of what account abstraction is for all the people in the audience that are not maybe too familiar with it. Let's just give maybe a high level overview of this before we get going. And for that, I honestly wanted to see if Noam was available, just adding him as a speaker now, because he had an amazing thread on account abstraction and described it really, really well. So Noam, if you're able to speak now, it'll be an amazing time to introduce yourself and then talk about this.
Yeah, can you guys hear me?
Yes, fantastic. Welcome on board.
Thanks. Thanks, Giuseppe.
Pleasure.
Awesome. So, hey guys, I'm Noam. I'm an engineer at Alchemy. I've been here about 2.5 years now. At Alchemy, we're a Web3 developer platform, and our mission is to bring 1 billion people on chain. I think account abstraction is imperative to that mission, in that we see no way for 1 billion end users to onboard onto crypto rails without the benefits of contract accounts. So we've been focusing on building some of the underlying infrastructure to both support 4337 as well as some native AA chains. So really excited for this conversation. Thanks for organizing.
Yeah, pleasure. And yeah, nice meeting you. And I'm really happy to delve a little bit deeper into this. So like you were saying, Alchemy is maybe about to roll some services like a paymaster, maybe bundler services. You had an amazing thread describing account abstraction. I was wondering if we can sort of like summarize it for all the people that are listening, and also let us know what Rihanna has to do with account abstraction.
Would love to. So account abstraction,
Thank you.
I think it's a bit of a difficult name to parse, but what it's referring to is that from a protocol's perspective, the type of the account is like getting abstracted away from the execution, meaning traditionally networks like Ethereum only support what's called EOA, externally owned accounts, and EIPs like ERC-4337 provide means for Ethereum to process contract accounts natively without having to adjust the protocol. So in that sense, like account abstraction, you can think of as enabling contract account execution on chain. And the reason that people care about is kind of what everyone else on this panel has been alluding to, is that instead of having your account tied to a single signing key, your account is now a programmable on-chain primitive that you can extend in any direction you need to improve the end user experience of interacting on chain, providing increased security, improved authentication, improved authorization, login flows, account automation, account recovery, etc. And these are all kind of primitives that developers have come to expect when providing end users value on the internet. And they're primitives that we're going to have to provide developers so that they can provide their end users value on Web3 rails.
Yeah, that's amazing. And it sort of brings me to something I was talking with Chiara yesterday, which is we were talking about her friends that are not really too much into Web3, but eventually there will be a point in which you will be interacting with any sort of Web3 DApp or protocol, and you won't even be aware that that is what's happening behind the scenes. So maybe Chiara, take a few minutes to expand on that.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yeah, totally fine.
Yay!
It seems like now we're cruising. Yeah, we had a couple of hairy minutes, but yeah, we're good to go.
Yeah, so we, as you said, we had a conversation yesterday, and I saw some friends a few weeks ago. Actually, no, it was a few days ago. And they were saying that, Web3 is never going to become mainstream. I'm never going to use it because you have to sign transactions and you have to deal with wallets. And that's so complicated. And, my grandma can barely even get her head around, centralized banking apps. So that's not going to happen. And account abstraction means that people will not know that they are dealing with Web3. They won't know that they're even interacting with the blockchain. They don't even need to know what the blockchain is. It will happen without them knowing. That jumper that they bought on some website online is going to be tokenized. They're going to be using tokens to pay for that. It's going to be represented with an NFT for proof of ownership. This is going to be particularly useful for things like, vintage items to say, I prove that I own this item, and they won't even know that those assets are going to be held in a wallet because that account is going to be completely abstracted away. Everything is going to be gasless, and 4337 is just crucial for that next step. And we also need to make it easy for developers to integrate ERC-4337 wallets into their apps as well. And I think that is definitely where Third Web is going to be useful, is that we're going to make it super easy for developers to build those smart contract wallets into their apps.
Amazing. Thank you. And thanks for the insights. Which brings me to, maybe let's see if we could get Tom's opinion on this, or maybe have Tom talk a little bit about this ERC-4337 and the proposal from Ethereum Foundation. Where are you guys at now, and what's going on, and what would you like maybe to share with us?
Yeah, so I think one of the key things that sometimes people miss about ERC-4337 is the fact that even though it's an EIP document, it's an ERC. And I'm not sure everybody is aware of the exact distinction there, but I think it's a key element here on why we're seeing such adoption for this standard. So for those unaware, EIPs are protocol changes that require a hard fork. Okay, like what we recently had for it, like what you had during, I forget the name, I think it was called London, or other like big changes that are, breaking changes. We all have to migrate, and if you want to stay with the old version, well, you can be on Ethereum Classic or something. But an ERC is kind of like everybody knows ERC-20. It's a standard in the sense that you can adopt it, you can add it, but if you don't, it's all good. Like it's a very forgiving protocol change. And this is a big reason why this is gaining. By the way, can you hear me? I just want to make sure everybody can hear me.
Yes, I can personally hear you. There is a little bit of lag, but overall much better than a few minutes ago.
Okay, great.
I can see that some people are not hearing too well, but yeah, I'm okay on my end.
Okay, great. And so this is what is driving adoption, because we are able to make this change without requiring a hard fork. And I think because this is a change that it's very important. And speaking as someone who, when I was working in Portis, I see the value in why we need good user experience to actually reach those billion users. Otherwise, this all ends up being just a really cool experiment, but it doesn't really change the world if we can't get to the mainstream adoption. So it's really critical we have good UX, but it's hard to sometimes justify it. And by going down the ERC path, we are able to actually have this work on mainnet, on other chains, in production. And down the line, we can make an additional change where we actually have it hard-coded like an EAP in the protocol, but this allows us to actually demonstrate how this can work and this can be valuable. And the key thing here is the user op mempool. And so speaking to that, there's a couple of great groups who are building bundlers. One of them is on the line right now, which is Alchemy. And this whole thing doesn't work if we don't have a lot of clients, a lot of projects building on top of it, because the key thing around ERC-4337, as opposed to account abstraction, which already exists, we have wallets like Argent, for instance, that did account abstraction. This is not a new concept by itself. What is important here is that we maintain this in a decentralized fashion. The way the user op mempool work and bundlers, it makes sure that everything stays decentralized. There's no single relayer that can censor you or can go down, and we all love our protocols to be uncensorable, no single point of failure, etc. So this is a really critical part of it. So first of all, I want to take this opportunity to thank everybody in the community for being a part of this, because this doesn't work without everybody, pitching in. And we recently released a new entry point contract as a result of the community finding it wasn't security bugs. There's no security issues with the entry point. I just want to make this completely clear. This was more about the way things, bundlers, or more specifically indexers, just like like we have Etherscan, so you have other projects in the space like AA Scanner and Jiffy Scan and a couple of others that are coming out that are offering Etherscan like solutions for ERC-4337, because the transactions are a little trickier to parse, because we have the bundles of user ops that are now a single huge transaction that goes into the block. So it's a little trickier to make that into like an Etherscan like experience. So with the changes that we did to the entry point were to make sure that they can work well with those transactions, because there was something around user op hashes, and I don't want to go too deep into that. And if you want to, you can go on our Twitter, and we posted a link to a document explaining everything. The key point here that I wanted to make was that we wouldn't have been able to do that without the involvement of the entire community. And speaking to that, this is basically what we're doing at the foundation. We're just, we put out the protocol on how a smart account or, the smart contract for an account should be, but there isn't a specific version that has, we expect the community to build out all the different wallets, like smart contract accounts. We don't have we have a very simple demo version. The idea is that we put out the protocol, the standards, something very low level, but it's up to the community to build on top of that. And the community has been building. Just now in East Tokyo, we had around 50 submissions in the hackathon, and we're still going through all the proposals that we got for the grants. And overall, the response from the community has been amazing. So that's really great. So yeah, if there's something, I hope I answered the question. I'm not sure I did, because I went kind of all over the place. But
yeah, I think you did. Yeah, and thank you. And it's really great having you here talking about this. Have a more direct experience with ERC-4337, the clarifications that he gave, and so just I'm happy to have you guys and enjoy join the conversation anytime. You said something really important that I thought at least resonated with me, which is this does not compromise decentralization, usability, and it's definitely enhanced security features. And that made me think about Intu, because like you guys say in your website or in the documentation, you're a high impact framework and you really focus on decentralization. So maybe James, I wanted to hear what you had to say about that.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. So I think that, at least me personally, 4337, it's provided us this really incredible framework as a community, like a common language, where we can start standardizing our approaches to these bigger goals, right? To account recovery, to better user experience with streaming payments, to optimizing for specific applications. And the bundler is absolutely great step. So I think at least at Intu, our bigger concern, right, was that with EOAs, with all their flaws, the one thing that they did provide us was this sense of self-sovereignty, right? This sense of control, that without participation of anybody else, I'm able to create an identity for these Web3 networks, right? It's not an IP address. It's not something that somebody has to create for me and provide to me and then can take it away from me. It's something that it's independent. And with the arbitrary user verification, of account abstraction, right? We're getting usability, but we also have to be careful that we're not linking that back to centralized sources of identity, right? If you use email, if you use SIM cards, if you use Twitter, right, then you're taking all this work that we've made to achieve this kind of independence and this decentralization of identity, and you're putting it back into the hands of the previous generation of identity issuers, right? Of people who provide identities to you. If the average user, if you lost access to your Gmail tomorrow, how many things could you not log into immediately? Could you access your bank account? Could you reset your SIM card? Could you get a new cell phone? Chances are it's very unlikely without having to go through a bunch of additional steps. And so, yes, decentralization, at an infrastructure level, 4337, fantastic. We have to be very cognizant of the risks that we're running when we're opening up this user identification to everything else, right? Is kind of where we're standing. And so at least, at Intu, we're very much, firm supporters of multi-party computation and using key shares, right? Removing the private key altogether, but still recognizing the fact that a lot of the internet, the stuff that we trust is because of cryptography. We want to abstract away from it without getting rid of it and making sure that we do that correctly. And so when we're doing something like arbitrary user verification, that it is biometrics connected to something like WebAuthn, which is then tied to something like a key share that then is natively cryptographically interacting with Web3, right? And so it's just making sure that we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater in a lot of ways. And yeah, so that's kind of our take. So yay, decentralization, yay, the bundlers, right? I'm so glad to see us moving away from centralized infrastructure and vendor risk, but need to like just also just take into account like this more holistic approach where yes, we need a better user experience, but we still want our end users to be completely completely independent of us, right? So if we cease to exist tomorrow as developers, that our users can continue using the network as intended, right?
Yeah, that's great. And you said something really important that resonated, which is identity. And identity is really important. Decentralized identity is really important. IOTX has done a lot of research on it. I wanted to hear what Larry had to say about that and how that relates to account abstraction.
Yeah, for sure. Can you guys give me a thumbs up if you can hear me fine?
Total thumbs up.
All right, perfect. Yeah, really great points made by everyone on the panel so far. I think what resonates to me is kind of like this ease of user experience, right? We talked a lot about the user experience from like a retail perspective, right? Onboarding the masses to Web3. What I do at IOTech is mostly focused on business development and talking to different projects and different companies, and the ease of onboarding of traditional companies into Web3 is going to be greatly simplified with account abstraction. And that's because everyone doesn't want to recreate a brand new identity model for how their devices and how their employees and et cetera are represented on chain. So in this budding DePIN space, for those that don't know about DePIN, it's decentralized physical infrastructure networks. The ability to represent a real world asset like a machine or a vehicle or a sensor on chain is just greatly amplified from this account abstraction concept, right? You think about the traditional Internet of Things deployment, there's a lot of co-ownership of every single gateway that connects to all these different types of sensors, and the ability to represent these things in an abstracted kind of hierarchical way is something that's brand new and is going to onboard a ton of companies to want to use decentralized infrastructure to power their deployments. And I think the other thing that it gives is kind of this decentralized finance layer on top of this DePIN sector, right? So the ability to authorize people to, borrow the energy created from your solar panel, or to, co-own different types of hardware that are revenue generating. This is going to unlock, the similar advantages that you see a lot in the NFT space, the financialization of these new crypto assets. And when we think about porting the real world over to the Web3 space, I think this account abstraction, being able to program who can access what device at what time, what happens when you have a service or a maintenance request for a device, authorizing a one-time access to the metadata or accessing the history of the service of this device, being able to fractionally own devices, being able to lend, borrow, trade devices and the cash flows that they generate and the data that they provide. It's just expanding the possibilities of this DePIN sector. So here at IOTech, we hear it from all the projects that we work with, right? We're infrastructure providers at the core. We build this IoT middleware that helps Web2 companies and Web3 startups, tap into this DePIN sector a lot easier. So it makes my job a lot easier to talk to these companies when we say, you don't have to follow this, completely non-native identity kind of concept, and you can kind of mimic what you already have in a Web3 fashion, but all powered through decentralized infrastructure.
Yeah, and that's great. And I think this is sort of like the through line of this conversation today. It is how each of these projects that are represented today are working to make this a reality and to expanding, like Noam was saying, Web3 to 1 billion users. I wanted to jump in, maybe like shift gear a little bit. We haven't heard much from Pseudotheos, and Noam had a question in our chat, which is if Scroll is built with native account abstraction. Theos, you feel like answering that?
Yeah, that's a great question. Hopefully this works now. Okay. So
yeah, totally.
So Scroll is a bytecode compatible zk-AVM. We're trying to be as close as possible to Ethereum without any compromises or anything. And so our main focus is to make developer and user experience pretty much identical to Ethereum Layer 1. So it already is now, in the sense that you can deploy a contract, even a precompiled contract, and it would work out of the box on Scroll. And so because of that, we've decided to go for ERC-4337 for more sort of neutral implementation of account abstraction. Obviously, that comes with its own trade-offs, but we think that sort of we'll be able to inherit and share a lot of the Ethereum Layer 1 account abstraction infrastructure, and it should be good. We've been doing a lot of work supporting teams that are building 4337 native protocols like Sol Wallet and Pamilico, and we're super excited to see how this is developing, because for a long time it feels like crypto has been very cyclical in the sense that it's been building for the same amount of users, where when we have account abstraction it feels like we're building for actually new users, which is something that hasn't happened in a while.
Great. And Noam, what do you think about that? Did that answer your question?
Yeah,
satisfied?
it did. That's awesome. Definitely with the framing. Also kind of circles back to Tom's earlier point of the value of having this be an ERC and having it be generally useful for all of the EVM compatible chains right now, beyond just Ethereum, which would have been the result of a L1 hard fork. So that's super cool. One other point to mention here, actually, this is new news as of this morning, but what we've been talking about around 4337 is an ERC for effectuating contract account transactions. So as an end user, how do I use a contract account and validation around lending that on chain? But there's nothing there actually standardizing the execution of contract accounts. And that's by design. The scope of 4337 is already quite massive, but there are needs for standards in the execution space too, around contract extensibility, batching transactions, etc. So as of this morning, we actually just published a draft for EIP 6900, which is another ERC proposing standards for the actual contract accounts themselves. Would love everyone on this group's feedback and thoughts. And in general, I think would love to engage the community on driving forward standards that are going to be useful for the entire space in terms of securing and promoting contract accounts.
That's amazing. And maybe feel free to share appropriate links or any content here in the chat so all the people can check it out, and then we can have a look at it as well. But yeah, definitely we'd be happy to join that discussion as well. In terms of proposals, I wanted to ask Rowland a question. Rowland, if you still a speaker, as a co-founder, how important are such proposals in moving forward project or company? See, I'll invite Rowland to speak if he feels like it. Or maybe Larry, if you want to take that, if Rowland is not able to speak. Oh, Rowland is here.
I'm here. Yeah, I think that's a really interesting question. On one side, people are always talking about, so it opens a lot of doors for the users. So they have to, just like among type of user, they don't have to know crypto at all to use crypto on an everyday basis, right? But I see something very differently. This also opens up a lot of opportunities for builders as well, because in the past we actually tie the signature back to the account. That means everybody owns the signature, owns a private key, who owns the account, right? But after AA, it basically separates this to be two things. An account actually living in the smart contract, while the signing mechanism or some sort of proof from the owner basically says how I want to use my fund in this account has been separated out into different services. So this opens up a lot of kind of microservice opportunities for developers as well. For example, I saw someone's working on the bundler services, right? So there are a few projects. I think Alchemy, you guys actually listed them on your website too, providing bundler services. I think that's one. And some other companies are doing a paymaster as well, because in the future, if you don't have any Ethereum in your account, but you still want to be part of some DeFi or a DApps, maybe you can pay using a ERC-20 token, or even you don't have to pay at all. A paymaster want to subsidize maybe for user growth, for some other benefit. Maybe you have a very high credit score. Maybe your addresses or get whitelisted somehow, right? So paymaster also become important, also I think a user engaging microservice. And the third one is some sort of MFA services. I imagine in the future there might be some a really big identity providers in the Web3 space, right? They don't have to. They basically release a user from doing the seed phrase at all. They may be providing a banking services, maybe do a KYC or an email sign up or phone sign up type of services. but it provides the way to, produce a proof to the users, so the users can actually sign up pretty quickly and interact with his account. So so that's a lot of opportunities for the builders. So definitely we're also working on some of those microservices over there.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing. That's great. And it's a huge opportunity for builders. And talking about that, I wanted to hear a little bit more from Danny. I was looking at the account abstraction documentation on Polygon, and there is a lot of very interesting information. I just wanted maybe you to comment a little bit on this and share with us.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of the points the folks mentioned are great. I'll try to also offer some more perspective, but generally speaking, the efforts at the lab are to apply account abstraction where applicable. So generally speaking, that means any EVM compatible chain or solution would adapt or inherit 4337. And maybe if we start off from mainnet, which is Polygon POS, that has branched off in many different parts. At least that's what the foreseeable future looks like, with the introduction of supernets, among other scaling and rollup solutions. And if we go on the app chain side, there's actually some ongoing research on how to also apply 3074. So the idea of this is contrary and complementary to 4337. 3074 introduces the concept of account abstraction, where a user can delegate control of their account to a trusted third party. So the team has spent some time in researching how we can apply this to application-specific transactions and how supernets can adapt this account standard. And then on the zkVM side, the team is looking to create a bundler with the sequencer. So the sequencer would basically publish a bundler interface and bundle a bunch of transactions from the alt mempool into a single transaction. And I think what is also really interesting to me, and I this is shared with other folks at the lab and also I imagine on the call, is we've been discussing this idea of the benefits that this offers to end users, right? So if we want to point and jot these down, you have this idea of arbitrary verification logic, where instead of having an external private key, which is essentially root access at all times and probably isn't the best approach, even if you know what you're doing, you have contract accounts that can use an arbitrary signature type. Then, as we know, you can sponsor transactions, more security features. And what is really interesting to me is this idea of atomic multiple operations. So you kind of have this idea of one-click deployments that you might be familiar with other platforms and modern computes today. And I think that's very powerful, especially when you're trying to execute multiple different things in parallel and also develop. So I think what account abstraction really brings us is this idea of being able to develop the way you would in a contemporary software environment without needing to know really anything about blockchain or crypto. So the backend is really abstracted for you. And I think that is a very powerful narrative, because we've been mentioning this idea of mass adoption, but there's also a lack of development efforts despite all the really neat and cool innovations that are going on and all the projects that are joined with us today. I think there's still a lack of development efforts, and maybe this is a point of discussion, maybe some food for thought that I can throw out there. I think if we were to be really pragmatic about the actual active native Web3 developers, there's probably no more than 35,000. And you can kind of imagine in today's world with what we often consider Web2 based software solutions and products, there's a massive gap. And the reason is because there's a very prominent abstraction layer with the way we develop centralized systems. And this allows us to, one, have this abstract primitive that allows you to also build these very powerful abstraction layers. And I think the solutions that Polygon Labs is trying to work on and bring together as time goes on is really an attest to that.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing. 100%. And what you said made me think of a few things, and that's why I wanted to loop in Battery and Chiara on this, because I think Third Web has an amazing developer experience. So I'd like, and Battery from Web3 Foundation really, at least from my understanding, really caters to Web3 developers and trying to, nurture cutting edge applications. So let's maybe loop in Chiara and then Battery afterwards, if that's okay with you guys.
Yeah, sounds good. So yeah, like you say, we really care about the developers, and all of this is amazing. But if it's impossible to integrate into your apps, it's impossible to integrate into your front ends or your back ends or whatever else it is that your project is building, then there's not really much point. You need that developer experience to be there in order to be able to streamline that process and get these things into the mainstream. So at Third Web, we're kind of taking the platform approach. So in the process of building a wallet SDK as we speak, and as part of this wallet SDK, we have built an out of the box customizable ERC-4337 compatible smart contract wallet. So like I say, this will work out of the box for your front end, but then it's also customizable if you would like to, override any functionality. So this will allow developers to kind of do two things. So as I said, you can easily build that smart contract wallet into your front end along with any other wallet provider that we have as a sort of component as part of the wallet SDK. And then the second thing is that you can then easily configure that smart wallet, as it will be available as a base smart contract in our wallet SDK, which is essentially just a range of different smart contracts, kind of like puzzle pieces that you can build together and then override any functionality so that you can make it specific to your use case. And just given that account abstraction is just going to be so crucial for onboarding users for Web3, it just makes sense to, as you say, make that developer experience as amazing as possible. So that's what we're aiming to achieve.
Yeah, I think you're pretty much succeeding at that. And so thanks for sharing.
Thank you so much.
Pleasure. Battery, let's have you loop in the conversation, and then we have a few more minutes. I just wanted to have final thoughts on you guys, maybe just looking at the future a little bit. But let's do Battery first.
Yeah, hello. So hopefully you can hear me okay.
Fantastic.
Okay, nice. So yeah, so it's a little different for me because I come from a non kind of EVM place here. So yeah, obviously, as a technical educator, Web3 Foundation, we're also working on a lot of material to do mostly with a lot of core blockchain developments, mostly to do with, actually how this stuff works and how to gain true utility out of it. Not just about creating some tokens and launching things like that. It's about, actually defining these true kind of Web3 interactions. I think that account abstraction ties directly into that concept because it really allows you to truly program your concept of ownership and really who you are and what you are as far as a digital presence on any given blockchain. So, it provides that useful primitive. But yeah, I think it'll really help kind of eliminate that barrier to do with, it could provide an initial entryway from, you learn kind of how these interactions work, and then you learn the cryptography versus having to really nail down, learning kind of complex cryptography right off the bat. This could give you a much easier intro into Web3 and using, actually gaining utility out of these technologies versus worrying about these developmental experiences.
Great. Thanks for sharing. Really appreciate it. So we have only a few more minutes. I don't want to take extra time. I just wanted to maybe go through all the panelists and just have you maybe share some final thoughts on what you, both as a Web3 person and also representing your company, what would you like to see as next steps? Where can this go? Or maybe, if you want to share something inspirational or some food for thoughts for people to take home with them after this discussion. Noam, maybe let's start with you.
For sure. And thanks for organizing IoTeX and Giuseppe. This was really good. I guess
Pleasure.
Looking forward, where we see things going is the analogy I give folks is kind of 25 years ago, during the peak of the internet bubble, there were internet companies and there were regular companies, and the internet companies were doing crazy novel things, and everyone thought they were a gimmick, and then that bubble crashed and people wrote it off. But now today, every company is an internet company, and they provide their end users value based on internet rails, but you don't call them internet companies. And this is kind of account abstraction is kind of the first stepping stone in applying that for crypto, where today there are crypto companies and not crypto companies. But if you fast forward a decade or two, what we expect to see is that all companies are crypto companies and they're providing value to their end users on crypto rails. And that experience is largely abstracted away from them, which is kind of what this paradigm enables. So from that perspective, we're really excited about what this brings to the table. At Alchemy specifically, we're building a lot of infrastructure to power this paradigm. So as folks mentioned, we're building a bundler. We'll be open sourcing that soon. It'll be powering some bundler services. And we're also writing paymaster contracts that will be powering paymaster services. We're working on providing some standards in this space to help streamline adoption and give developers more leverage. And in general, we kind of see this as like a must-have component for crypto's wide-scale adoption. So we're really excited to lean into it with all the folks on this call and continue to drive this forward.
Amazing. Thank you. And thanks for sharing. It was great having you and Alchemy and like learning about everything that you guys are doing in the space. It's definitely amazing having you. Larry, how about you? Maybe a couple of final thoughts, maybe take a minute or two.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think needless to say, the onboarding of the masses is definitely something that, is top of mind. Getting more people to engage with Web3 for the first time. I think, all of us have that first interaction with Web3 experience, some better than others, but giving people a nice starting point where you don't have to worry about writing things down on a piece of paper to use Ether Delta and all these crazy battle stories that we've had. It can be a more pleasant one, but I think there's a lot of work to get there, right? Like similar things with the traditional world of two-factor authentication, multi-factor authentication. That industry has evolved so quickly over the past 10 years that if we can apply what's been built already and add that as the 2FA or the 3FA on top of the crypto security that there already is, I think it's just going to make the entire industry a more enjoyable place to interact in, right? And, from a IoTech specific perspective, I think one huge opportunity that this stuff gives is I think the fractional ownership of machines. I think one of the big barriers to entry for a lot of use cases is there's a huge capital expenditure required to put machinery or large devices out there, right? The ability to fractionally own one $10,000 machine that's generating a lot of revenue, like a solar panel, is just going to transform the entire DeepIn space a lot. It's going to allow people to, get in and be partial owners in a lot of the public utilities that are being decentralized and a lot of the data networks that are being decentralized today. So it opens the door for builders and users, as has been said throughout this panel. So I'm just excited to see what comes next with AA and some other new primitives that are being launched.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing. Yeah, I mean, maybe it's biased, but I think that blockchain and the machines really cater well to each other. So, but that's just because it's coming from IoTex. Anyway, thanks for sharing that, Larry. I wanted to maybe see, Tom, what do you think? Final thoughts, something that you want to leave the guests with today?
Yeah, so I would say, can you guys hear me?
Yeah, perfectly fine.
Okay, great. So I would say that, I think that one of the things that people are always saying in regards to Ethereum is we're waiting for that killer dApp, right? And I'd like to raise a theory that maybe the killer dApp was already kind of created maybe a couple of years ago, but the conditions were not right. We didn't have all the pieces in place to make it really, big killer, so to speak, in the sense that it can reach everybody, be usable, problems with gas fees, which Paymasters solve, problem with onboarding, which this 4337 also solved. Maybe you want it to be somehow integrated into real, devices in the real world, which is where IoTex can step in. So I feel like right now, and I'm not speaking for the foundation, I'm speaking for myself, but I feel that we are getting to this perfect storm kind of situation where we have a lot of pieces in place that today, well, not today, but very soon, if someone comes out with this really useful application that doesn't have to use the words blockchain or decentralization in explaining its value, because the fact that it's decentralized and on the blockchain offers inherent values, but it's also something that's usable, that people can actually get in their hands, start using. And we saw some I saw things in this recent East Tokyo hackathon that would have blown me away 2 years ago, because it's so simple to create things right now that are so powerful in the sense that users don't worry about gas, don't worry about private keys, don't worry about anything. They just start using, they just start interacting with something right away, but they maintain all the values of decentralization, et cetera, and everything that we care about. So I'm really, really hopeful that we're going to see this killer application in the near future. I think that's going to be a real big game changer, because that's, just like email or whatever, that's going to encourage everybody to actually, onboard onto this ecosystem, because there's something that's actually very useful for them that, kind of justifies it, so to speak. But it's not going to be a big ask. We're not telling them, oh, here's a list of instructions, you got to install extensions, go on different, exchanges, go through KYC, whatever. No, it's just going to be as simple as tapping your credit card to your phone or something. It's going to be something super simple. So, yeah, I think that's going to be pretty exciting once we get there.
Thanks for sharing that, Tom. I was looking for inspiration for all the listeners, and I think you nailed it. So thanks. Awesome having you. Let's try to wrap it up, guys. I want to give everybody a chance to say goodbye. We do you now.
Yeah, sure. Once again, thanks for hosting. It's been really nice to talk about account abstraction. I'm super passionate about it. I guess I'd say my immediate favorite things, well, there's obviously a huge list, but I'm really excited for Paymasters. We had a hackathon project that allowed people to pay for gas fees with PayPal, and that was only possible because of 4337. And sort of, I think everyone's always had that experience where they run out of gas on a wallet and they have an ERC-20 token in there, and then they have to like transfer ETH over to end up doing anything with it, and it's just a pain. So that's kind of one of the immediate micro things that I'm really excited to sort of have a solution for. And then I think the more macro thing is that it allows us to start building for users that aren't crypto native. And I think that right now, the majority of applications that are being built for people that are already crypto native and people that are already familiar with crypto, how it works, and all these things. And sort of account abstraction will lower that barrier to entry massively and just add a lot of sort of, I guess, new frontiers for protocols and exciting new use cases.
Thank you. It was great having you, and thanks for sharing all of what you shared, about Scroll and what you guys are doing in account abstraction. So thank you. Let's do Danny.
Thanks again for putting this together. It was a great discussion, and not to go too over, I'll try to be fast. I think what comes to mind immediately is this like intuitive interaction and experience that you get with other things. And it's something that I'm definitely looking forward to, not just with the things Polygon Lab is working on, but generally speaking, and not even just like an EVM or Ethereum based ecosystem, but just like the Web3 space in general. And I think what is top of mind for me, at least, is like the continuation of these like core pillars, part of the infrastructure that allows you to actually create the necessary interfaces and like services and tools for users to use things intuitively like they do now, and actually solve some issues that we have now with like the current model of the internet. I imagine if you have different networks and chains with different user bases, all of them being able to represent their interests at the fundamental protocol level and like raising their opinions on what is important to them, whether it's like interoperating with different chains or the way like things are composable, then you might find that like what you might see on your like iPhone today, for example, with iMessage, where it's only Apple and iOS specific, you might find something like that for, a lot of other different like operating systems or networks. And like that's just something that comes up to mind. But I think examples like that is what abstraction allows you to do, and it basically gives like this powerful core piece of this entire infrastructure, which is like this account that is not just for holding assets, but it's like sovereignty for a user. And I think that with all these like pieces together, you start to actually not just solve issues with decentralization, but you actually solve just general service issues, and like you make applications better than they are today.
Awesome. Danny, thanks again for sharing. Thanks for being here. Looking forward to, what's next from Polygon Labs. Chiara, a quick goodbye, final thought from you, and then James and Battery.
Yeah, I'll keep it short and sweet. I feel like people have mostly covered the main reasons why I'm excited about account abstraction. I'm just going to leave everyone with a little question. So, given that smart contract wallets are dictated by code, they are completely open to what your code dictates that they will do. And what do I mean by that? You can define any behavior through the code. If you can define that behavior yourself, what would you do? What would it mean to have a smart contract that was ERC-4337 compatible, but also ERC-20? And what could you do with that? So I'd love to see what people can come up with as answers to that question, because that's currently what I'm noodling over. And also wanted to say a massive, massive thank you to you, Giuseppe. You've done an amazing job, and this has been a really, really good fun.
Thank you, appreciate it, and thanks for dropping the question at the end. And let's maybe have our guests and listeners leave with it. Thanks for having you. Let's go to James and then Battery, and then we'll wrap it up.
All right. Well, again, big thanks to IoTeX. I'd like to echo the sentiments of the other panelists, particularly Tom. Like, we have to stop inventing words for Web3, and we have to start talking about it in a normal way. I think that account abstraction, we're really at a moment, we have an opportunity to engage our community. So if you're listening, get involved. Let us know what kind of behaviors you expect to happen. Like, when I Web3, I thought it would work this way, and then it didn't. Like, we have an opportunity right now to really kind of closer approach that human expectation side of it. But we're also, heads down, and we're very close to the technical side of it. And so if this is of interest to you, everyone that's listening, get involved. And hopefully that'll also help us identify some of the risks, right? And help avoid some of the pitfalls, and really build an experience that isn't just as good as Web 2, but really pushes the envelope and is truly Web3, right? This is the next generation. How can we do this in a way that's a lot better? So thanks again for having us. Look forward to the next one. And yeah, thanks, Giuseppe.
Pleasure having you. Thanks for sharing. Battery.
Hello, and
floor is yours.
Thank you. And first of all, thank you to IoTX. This is quite a cool space, and I think that the concept in general of like IoT and blockchain, it's something that I've done previously in the past, and it's a really, really solid combination and use case for this space. So yeah, I think I'm going to echo what a lot of other people said here because they kind of covered it, but I think the overarching idea of kind of 1,000-foot view of why this matters, why AA matters, why these more abstract protocols matter, it shows that we're at this pinnacle point where we've reached with this technology, that we've developed it to this point of being able to now think about these things that will enable for mass adoption. So it's actually quite exciting. We're able to now truly think about, well, this technology is really great. We can use it for, an infinite amount of use cases. But, most people, when they use an application, they're not going to want to know blockchain is there. Just the same way people don't care if their application is using MySQL or using MongoDB behind the stack. It's simply not really part of the discussion for normal consumer users. So really the thing I'm most excited for is just seeing this direction of abstraction and bringing true adoption to the masses in a way that actually upgrades Web 2 to Web 3.
Battery, thanks again. Thanks for joining. It was a pleasure having you. I just want to take the last 30 seconds to have Larry on stage for a minute, because I'm not sure if we mentioned it, but IoTeX did just approve a proposal for account abstraction. But I'd like Larry to just be a little bit more specific about that, and then we wrap it up.
Yeah, we ran a governance proposal, one of the fastest votes we've ever had to discuss the benefits of account abstraction for our layer 1. And the governance proposal was voted through. So we're going to be applying all the things we talked about at this intersection of IoT and blockchain and starting to do some experiments. So anyone on the call right now interested in building, we have a grants program. Would love to talk about AA-specific grants, and hope to see a lot of cross-chain collaboration with all the great layer 1s on this call, Polkadot, Polygon, and the entire crypto ecosystem. So I do think this account abstraction is going to also enable a lot of interoperability between different VMs. So excited to see all the possibilities. So yeah, I appreciate it. Giuseppe did a great job through the weird baby voices in the beginning and all that. So props to you for being a great moderator.
Thank you. Yeah, the first few minutes were intense. It was like, it can't get worse than that. And yeah, hopefully, and then it got better. So yeah, thanks everyone for sharing all your amazing thoughts. It was really a pleasure hosting. I think we're all friends now. So I hope that there will be more cross collaboration between all these amazing projects. And yeah, I'll talk to you guys around. See you on socials. See you somewhere in the world for all the Web3 conferences we're attending. There will be a consensus next week, Austin. Otherwise, yeah, everybody have a good one. Thank you.